clear. We're all clear and ready. All right. I'm going to read something out of this book that I don't know if you guys can find this book or not. I pulled it off of the internet, but it's not actually a poem. Well, it may be a poem. But anyway, it's called The Oneness of God. And I'm going to read this, and we're going to jump in.
Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
And it reads like this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O man made of the very substance of God. You and God are one and undivided. Man, the world, and all within it are conditioned states of the unconditioned one God. You are this one. You are God conditioned as man. All that you believe God to be, you are. But you will never know this to be true until you stop claiming it of another and recognize this seeming other to be yourself. God and man, spirit and matter, the formless and the formed, the creator and the creation, the cause and the effect. Your Father and you are one. This one in whom all conditioned states live and move and have their being is your I am, your unconditioned consciousness. And I got a little more. Before I became aware of being someone, I, unconditioned awareness, was aware of being. And this awareness does not depend upon being someone. As the conditioned state, I might forget who I am or where I am, but I cannot forget that I am. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. All that I have ever believed myself to be, all that I now believe myself to be, and all that I shall ever believe myself to be are attempts to know myself, the unknown, the undefined reality. I thought that was excellent, excellent, excellent to bring us back to the truth of who we are.
Now, the judgments that we work with in this dimension, if you're going to move on in to a deeper awareness of your true identity, these judgments must be suspended about who you are by physical birth and who you are into the seemingly the far limits of your spiritual birth.
Mm-hmm.
In the years that I've been in this, we say 35 or more of pastoring and
50 in the
50
ministry.
or 51 in the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
She and I have witnessed some of the most amazing people in the denominational and church.
Yes.
But not any of them that I have been around ever taught from the book and paper or from brick and mortar.
They never taught from that?
Then wait a minute, hold on. They never taught about how to recognize the ego.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They never taught how to do that. They never taught what it looks like. And the reason why is because ego does not like being pointed out or noted.
And a lot of us included, a lot of ministers, us included, were actually egoically teaching. We were teaching from our own egos as well.
That's right. In the 23rd chapter of Matthew, can you turn to it?
Sure.
I want you to help me with this because this is something I just run across. I've been around a lot of healing preachers. My quest and research during that time was to find out the ones that was somewhat among us, even down to the late great Catherine Kuhlman, who believed that in her life that everybody in her miracle services, about 1,000, would be healed before she left her body.
That was what she was believing for.
23rd and can you read this? The first section, all the way down. I'll tell you when to stop.
At the first, all the way down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It says, "Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat."
Now hold on to that. That's what we are. That's what we're dealing with in this generation. Go ahead.
"All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not."
Okay, that's what's going on today. It's been going on ever since.
Okay. "For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne."
Ego, listen to this.
"And lay them on men's shoulders."
Ego, listen to this.
"But they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers."
Ego. Go ahead.
"But all their works they do for to be seen of men."
Ego.
"They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments."
Ooh.
What is phylactery?
That fifth verse. I don't know what that phylactery is, but that's
anybody knows what phylactery is?
Read it again. But all their works.
"But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments." In other words, they get really, really flashy. And
that's what we are in today.
"And love the uppermost rooms at feasts."
There you go.
"And the chief seats in the synagogues."
There you go with Trump Tower.
I want to sit up front, and I want to sit in the pulpit, and I want to sit here, and I want to sit. "And greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi."
Now, when I got over into this, one of the first things when I started out young, I wanted to find out what my calling was. And I was so much after that I went to the bishops and the elders in the apostolic and the evangelical areas, and I wanted them to ordain me, and nobody would do it. But I had to wait until a certain time. I went to the library and talked to librarians who they could give me my paperwork. Finally, one day, it happened in Lower South Carolina at Grace Christian College and School. The dean and pastor of the church walked into my church during that time and gave my wife and I honorariums of 6 doctorate degrees from a college in Lois, Grace Christian School and College. But after I got them, I put them on the wall. They still packed away. And I never did find out what I could do with them, except if I wanted a job and they needed credentials, I could give them that. But something happened to me on the inside because I searched diligently to find out how to get the God's miracle working power to do through me what it was doing through all those that I saw. I met and saw some of the most amazing, in physical form, miracles take place. I wept and I cried and travailed. I tried to fast and pray for 40 days and 40 nights because I thought maybe if I did that, the rest of them did it and they got it. But I didn't know if I had time on this broadcast, this telecast, I would take you through the actual details.
Before you get into that, I wanted to, first of all, Katrina said that phylactery is a small leather box containing Hebrew text. And then Sue asks what verse that was. And we're in chapter 23 of Matthew. And I read down to the 7th verse, Sue. That's where we were.
And the verse with phylactery is its 5th verse. But anyway, it's almost like the phylactery, they carry the verses like carrying your Bible in a briefcase. That would be metaphorically speaking. But one day I saw a preacher stand out in front of people, and he was ministering the gifts of the Spirit, word of knowledge, discerning of spirit, miracle healing, prophecy, interpretation. I've seen all 9 of these men, and so other 9 gifts operate in our life since we've been on this earth for 73 years. And one day I was standing in front of somebody and I called him out to minister to him. And the Spirit told me, said, turn your back to them and tell them everything you see.
Okay.
And I did. And in the process of that, on down the road, he said, now you see, you do not have to see people physically in order for you to know them. So over the years, he taught me how to do the same thing on television without seeing people seeing me, on telephone,
Mm-hmm.
and be in another room.
Mm-hmm. So remotely.
Or
You're remotely.
blindfolded. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
I could turn my back on them and still do the same thing.
Right. So now, how does that apply to what you're reading here?
All right, I'm reading this to. Oh yeah, I'm reading this to get you to understand that these guys are these people that I know, just like the ones on television that's fussing and fighting over the past election. They want to be seen, but when I found out what was going on about the ones that wanted to be seen, I run across the word ego.
Right.
And when
that was the first, oh wow, I remember when we first started talking about ego in our church. At the time we had 500 people and we started talking about the ego, and man, everything started busting loose.
Everything. And it started sticking its head out, and some of the people around there started going around telling, that's ego, that's ego, that ain't God, that's ego.
And all of a sudden the dismantling started.
Yep, that's right. It was then that people began to thin out in my church. And I found out that we were under a pastor that, I must say this, he was really hell and brimstone.
Fire and brimstone.
Fire and brimstone. He was fire and brimstone.
Yeah,
he would stand up on the benches and the
chairs. But he did us the most good.
Yeah.
Because he completely, well, I won't say completely, but I'll say he did 80% of wiping out the ego.
He did.
I mean, talking about feeling like a penny with a hole in it.
Yes. And he preached so much against it that he walked and went.
But we almost didn't recover.
Almost. That's right.
The grace of God led us to another female pastor. Her name was Ruth Bovender. And she healed us.
Yes, she did.
She took us in under a wing. She began to just kind of gently push us out in front of people because we were devastated.
Yes,
we were no good for the ministry at all. And we were like, he had said to us that if we leave there, we weren't going to live, we're going to make it, and all kinds of stuff. But she took us in and nurtured us and literally helped us to get back on our spiritual feet without building up a whole lot of our ego again.
Read that.
But I like this passage because it really does tell you what the ego looks like.
He described in detail. Years ago when I read this, I was just reading it because...
Can I read it again?
Yeah, go ahead.
It really does tell
go ahead,
you.
read again.
Okay, and I'm going to start...
At the second verse.
At the second verse, yes. Saying... Well, I'll start at first. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying... This is the
23rd chapter of Matthew now.
Yeah. The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. And... sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatsoever they bid you, observe. That observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. I remember how many times have we come out of a church service feeling more burdened down than we were before we got there. Because we were told we weren't good enough, or we weren't pleasing God, all of the judgmental things. Then it says, but all their works they do for to be seen of men.
That's it.
They make broad their phylacteries.
That's it.
Those were what Trina told us about. There was a little thing they did to put the scriptures in, and the Jewish men wore those for morning prayer as a reminder, she said. and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts,
Oh, yeah.
and the chief seats in the synagogues.
Hey, hold about that. I used to tell preachers when they would invite me to their churches to preach that if they wasn't preaching them on the healing power of God and actually making their services available for that to take place, that they were going to die and go to hell.
Right.
That's
So
how
we
strict
picked
that
up a
was.
lot of the judgments.
That's right.
Of speaking judgments, just like our
But
mentors.
I want
did.
you guys to know I didn't understand. I didn't know what I see now. Totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it says, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. So they love titles. So this gives you a good view of what an ego looks like in ministry. In ministry, because we have seen so many who are in ministry and even outside. I don't want to stay confined to our evangelical box right now, because there have been egoic spiritual teachers as well. In the non-dual community, in the ACIM community, there have been non-dual teachers all the way through in every spiritual community. So what we're saying now is that knowing what the ego is and how the ego operates helps you, because you can see, and if you're like myself, sometimes you'll find yourself being egoic, but you'll catch yourself in the midst of it. And when you catch yourself, you're not bound by it. That's right. That's the main thing.
Now I'm going to say this, and I'm going to eat the head and leave the sticks. I'm going to be point blank with this thing, and I'm not going to platform it or ride on it. I'm going to tell you how the mule rides us, and not us riding the mule. Our government has displayed in the last month or so, well, maybe more than that. I'm just particular one. What the ego acts like when it causes riots and disturbances in our Capitol building and those that are connected to it. Ego is the one that kills, steals, and destroys. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. But that the main one that they're saying that's behind that, his ego is what's flashing up now, even though he is not in the main position. But there are people around him who still are admonishing him as though he should have been in position this next 4 years. But at the same time, that's what we're talking about, the ego, because she just read it to you. Now, go ahead and finish reading some more.
You want to read more?
Yeah, because there's more in there.
Oh, okay. I will. I'll get to it. All right. But be not ye called Rabbi.
Now, wait a minute, hold right there. That's not saying that he was not meant to be in the seat. That's just telling you what's working through him and spreading all over the country. Go ahead.
Be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call
That's
no
right.
man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven.
The Democrat and Republican itself is egotistical.
Well, we talk, and I don't know how we got on politics.
But we're talking about ego. Go ahead.
We're talking about ego. I said to him yesterday that I've noticed that there had been an attachment formed, an identification formed with the Democratic Party, because every time I heard something that sounded as if the Republicans were going to win, I felt some kind of way.
Yeah.
And that gave me a clue that I was already lost in my egoic thinking. So the ego is a slippery slide thing.
You know what I call it, and y'all probably heard me say that those have been around us. Ego is a ghost with a bad toothache.
And that's all it is a ghost, because it is not actually an entity.
No, it's a psychological identity.
Yes, it's when we're believing that we're something and we're not.
And that's the one that Jesus dealt with in the wilderness. Yes. Now, I'm not trying to say to you guys that the Bible, the different versions of it, or not the Bible, or the Course, or either one of them. I'm not trying to put either one of them in their place as being the higher superior or right. Because the most important thing about what we're telling you, that superiority is removed But when you get over into finding out who you really are and waking up to your true identity, you're going to find out that there's nobody in the earth but God. I'm not going to put a name on it.
Yes.
And you say, I am, or you are, they are. You can go Joe, Bill, Moore, or Skid Row. I'm just telling you that the key to this whole thing is recognizing that God is, and you don't want to use that too much because there are people that have problem with that.
Yes.
So we just leave it where it is. Let the grass grow where it can. Okay.
Let the grass grow where it can.
Should
Should I read some more?
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
All right. Neither be ye called master.
Okay. I wanted to be an apostle. I could go through every last one of the credentials of the fivefold ministry and fit in them all. I've worked in all of them, but I don't want them. Mm-hmm. I don't have to have them.
Now there's no attachment. There's no identification.
And I was scared that if I didn't say that I would be letting God down. I would be relinquishing my calling, and that I would be under judgment if I did.
Not understanding that you can fulfill a role and still not have an identity with it.
I studied if you guys are interested, I studied everything that you could go through to find out what gifts operate with each ministry. They come in clusters, and they operate with certain ones to verify the office that they stand in. I found out who it was. Now, I like to say this. Some of us out there that are in the course and in enlightenment and waking up, and some of the top ones, if they have been through it, fine. But it was not meant for us to go through this and then switch over and make it become our enemy. It was a stepping stool. It was a speed bump. Stepping stone. It was step stool. It was included inclusively into our life, as it was with Carlton Pearson. Yes. We were supposed to go through all of this as the insight evolutionary wisdom of God worked itself into us, that we could operate as all men.
And so one of the things that we've had to deal with is that for years, like he said, we've been trying to find our niche, what group we belong to. Mm-hmm. Do we belong to this group?
What camp?
What camp do we belong to? And we realize now we don't belong to any camp, and it's supposed to be that way.
I know
there's not supposed to be one camp that I have my allegiance to.
Right. I know some people in heaven, that place that we say we go to, that is really no distant place from who we really are. I've seen them over there, and some of these people I've seen come over here, and they know everything that we're talking about and never touched the Bible, never touched the course, never touched church, never touched religion, and they can sit down and talk to you about everything we're talking about and not go where we've been.
Right. But I think what we've had happen to us over the years is a deliverance from the tribal mentality.
Yes.
Tribal mentality.
Yes. Yes.
There doesn't have to be one particular group that I am involved with. I can be involved with them, but not so much identified with them. So that and people, that's one of the things that when it's our basic need, the need to belong. And so this particular camp that we are now is all inclusive.
Inclusive, yeah.
All inclusive.
If you think back, honey, we were into the all inclusiveness when we started out, but we kept switching back and forth. Now, here's something I found out, and y'all heard me talk about it. I was watching, and just stay with me now. I was watching America Got Talent, and that was a young lady who was an Olympic gold medal winner, participant. She and her husband, and some of you may remember this, was out on the field track and field event, and they was actually gold medalists. I mean, they was top of the line. And he was doing some kind of hurdling or jumping, and he slipped, his foot slipped, and he fell, went over the whatever, and hurt his back, and he was paralyzed from the neck down. She came on America Got Talent and told the event about how she felt after that. She's still with him. They got married after he was in the wheelchair and couldn't move. She married him anyway. And she felt really guilty about the situation. And he tried to explain to her that it was nothing to it. But here's my point. I had something that happened to me when I was watching her sing and looking at him in the wheelchair. I found out years ago how to push, like pushing a wheelbarrow, like pushing a door open. I found out, and I sit there and I watch him, and with tears and travailing, the first thing I did, I'm spontaneous. I chose to push the resurrection power outside of me to touch him in that television screen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember doing that one time when I was in the basement where we used to live at a house, and I pushed myself out to assist a man in Africa
That you didn't know.
that I didn't know, and I could see him.
That
and
you
intuitively picked him up, connected
yes.
with him, and helped him in a deliverance for a person. Now listen, I'm saying this to you to get you to understand. You'll start out, if you study this and learn it well, you'll experience these manifestations. My point is that these areas that it talks about in the Bible of the gifts of the Spirit is not really gifts of the Spirit. They are spirit beings' potential.
Innate abilities.
That's right. Everybody, if you want to say, carry them, have them, and can work with them. But the church and the world has classified them in terminology word psychic gifts versus the real gifts of the Spirit.
And that's because the church, unfortunately, the evangelical church is a little worse off than some other churches, but they're not all inclusive. So they have, okay, this is God's people over here, and these people are not God's people. And these people are of God, these people are of the devil. So there's always that conflict.
So what I started doing, I didn't say anything about it, and I'm saying it now. I mean, this is the way it is. I said I was shown that there were gates that these guys had found out about, and some of these evangelists that I found out about who could do these things went to a foreign country and found out what they were doing. And when they got over there, they come back over here with people that are blinded. They couldn't see what was behind the way they function in these manifestations of the gifts. And they would use them on people over here in the church and make millions off of them. Make thousands of dollars off of them. And there are some prophetic schools that are used that'll teach you how to function in these manifestations, but they are the same basic techniques that they teach people in foreign countries and what we would call psychic schools.
True.
Now, the Lord showed me that I didn't have to use those techniques that they would use to function in these areas, but I didn't need to find out how they are awake or are they lying dormant inside of everybody, and they are. I know people who can function in these things, and some people would say, well, they're doing it by familiar spirits. Well, let me ask you something. If they're doing it by familiar spirits and they're doing it through the occult, and I found out people who were doing the same thing in the church baptized with the Holy Ghost, which one is more familiar than the other one that is familiar? They had to be familiar with the Spirit of God as well as those others that was familiar with familiar spirits. Either way, you are the familiarity of the functioning of the way they were. So when I put two and two together, I found out that there were basic line principles that all of them used. And I'm telling you, I saw those who were somewhat among us who spent hours praying in tongues in the closet. And I'm not turning against them. I'm just telling you, this is the way you work it. You have to work these things until you have to deliberately, with effort, work and consciously, deliberately work them, and then finally drop them, because you will run into the ego. You will get to the place, if I could show you, you would get to the place where you could work these manifestations. I mean, based on your spiritual temperament, you could be able to turn the stripe on a leopard back, change the spot on, not a leopard back, I'm sorry, change the stripe on a zebra's back, and change the spot on a leopard. You will be able to make water run uphill. You will be able to bake a cake and never touch the stove. I'm just giving you metaphorically the example of what you could do, because your potential would be like Superman coming to Earth as Clark Kent and disguised as Clark Kent with a Superman identity and do things over here that would be supernatural, but over there, they're just normal. Now I'm telling you that once I found out how to let go of them, I now found out the definition of true compassion, real love, without being seen, and still work these manifestations without the ego.
Well, one of our, I'll call it a dilemma because it felt like that at one time. It kind of still does. When you were doing all of that,
Mm-hmm.
of course, uh, we were in the religious
Mm-hmm.
setting,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a church service, and we set our services up to have to
Mm-hmm.
around
We
that.
set it
We
up for
set
that.
it up
And
around
you
that.
can't set your church or your building or your house up for that. Just like these psychic folks that have the sign up in their front yard for anybody in need of reading or that. You do that. Yeah, go ahead.
But we set it up for that. And so a lot of the egotism we didn't realize we were in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in order to do those
Mm-hmm.
exploits that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
While we had good intentions, there was always the ego that wanted to be seen,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes that there's a desire to do something for someone else, not so much to be seen, but because it's the only
Mm-hmm.
thing that gives me
Mm-hmm.
self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we no longer needed that for our self-worth, and we no longer wanted to be seen because the
Mm-hmm.
ego had been diminished, then there was the dilemma of how to do it now in a different way.
That's right. That's right. Now it's a way.
But I need to
Yeah, go ahead.
address some
Go
things
ahead.
here.
Go
I
ahead,
know
baby.
you're on
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
rabbit
Go
trail,
ahead. Go
but
ahead. You're fine.
Sinette asked this question. I'm going to
Mhm.
put it up so you can see it. She said, I am involved in politics. Show the way, but not get engaged in the fight. Just showing a vision, how
Mhm.
to get engaged and not let your ego take over. Any advice?
You are on the right track. Your statement within itself is the speaking of your inner wisdom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the only thing that I remember when I began to find out about the working of these powers, you will always have the assistance, like Jesus said in the temple. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He hath anointed me to heal the sick, to open prison doors, and set the captive free. You find out that there were 7 manifestations of spirits or beings that worked with Him. And you go back in Isaiah and look that up, where He talked about the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He hath anointed me to heal the sick, to set the captive free.
Mm-hmm.
You will find out that there's other light beings that work with you in this. But here's the clue to this thing. When I looked up the powers that worked through Moses in the scriptures, along with the magicians that worked in Pharaoh's court, they operated under the same gates and the same principles until Moses got over there to operate in the lesser ego than the rest of them. Moses began to operate from the pure self, which was actually using the same principle. They put it like this: the power that the magicians used was the power that was in Moses, but they was using it for an ego cause. Now, let's go on into it, because as you stay around these people in politics and like that, you'll have to learn to eat the hay and leave the sticks, like we've always talked about.
May I inject something?
Mm-hmm.
I know someone that's an icon just passed this week.
Mm-hmm.
That's Cicely Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
She, in her last interviews, made a comment that she had an incident that she realized that there was so much racism
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that she encountered
Mm-hmm.
in her
That's ego.
in her effort to become an actress.
Mm-hmm.
And when she did, it caused her to make a decision. She made the decision that she would use her career as a platform. And that platform, she would use that platform to address issues that needed to be addressed,
Yeah.
that had disturbed her and other people. So while I can't say that her desire, her aspiration was egoic, but Spirit used that. So it's not like you got to sit back and say, well, I can't do this because it's egoic. Or I can't do that because you really have to have a spontaneous life. In the event that you're involved with anything like politics, which Lord knows we've been watching the news like crazy. And we've never been news people. We never really watched the news, but lately it's like it's at the forefront of our minds. And I found myself being attached to the Democrats, even though I have voted Republican at times and I vote Democrat. It depends on what their values and their agendas and all of that is. So so in the political arena, it will be hard to stay out of the ego because you will want to take a side.
It will cause you to
want to take a side.
It will want to do that.
To try to be all inclusive is the goal.
Yeah. Now, if you go into it, Jeanette, if you go into it with your eyes open, you will see. Let me tell you what, your perception and insight, discerning. You remember when Peter and Jesus were talking about who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And Peter said, thou art the Christ. And Jesus said, the flesh and blood did not reveal it to you, but the Father. Then the next few minutes, Jesus began to tell Peter and the rest of them how and what his destiny was on the cross and resurrection. And Peter began to rebuke him. And Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. The Luciferian principle is operating in D.C. and other places. You'll have to go deep enough into your. Let me tell you this.
And the Luciferian. This is the thing. We, especially those of who've been in evangelical circles in church, and we talk about. We have talked about the devil and satanic.
That's the ego.
Demonic.
That's the cover up for
influence,
the ego.
But we have not talked about Luciferian.
No, that's the cover. The Luciferian is the cover up.
Luciferian influence looks real lofty.
Oh.
It looks lofty and good. And it looks like a good thing.
It's like putting lipstick on a pig.
And then you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is not a good thing.
Put a dress on a pig and lipstick and high heel shoes.
I'll give you an example of how the ego works in the Luciferian principle, just real quick. We were at, I think it was a restaurant last week, and we went out. We don't normally go out to a large restaurant because we're trying to stay safe, but we wanted something special, so we went out. And when we did, I had somebody had sent us $200 about a month ago in the mail. I gave him $100 and I kept $100. And I kept that $100 bill in my bill folder for that length of time, not really doing anything with it because I'm not a cash girl. I don't do cash much. But anyway, at the end of our meal, I felt impressed to give the waitress that $100 bill for her tip. And I did that. I did it. And when I did, of course, she had her response and she was all elated and everything and thanked us so much because she had just taken in a 17-year-old girl and had no way of really taking care of her.
That's what she told us at the table.
And so afterwards, he got up and before we left, gave her another one. But on the way out, I remember feeling, I wonder how she responded with that second one.
Okay.
The ego slipped right in there like, I wonder how she responded with that second one. And I wanted to know that she really appreciated it.
Now, you know what? I'm glad you said that. Usually when we do something like that, I always tell the one, if we do it in a restaurant, do not tell the others. Right. And when I took this back there to give to her, one of the girls was standing right there beside and saw it. And I said, doggone it. I wasn't private enough. I didn't crucify or kill the ego enough to do it in secret.
Mm.
You know when to do it public and when not to.
So even doing good, Luciferian principle can be, it'll float on the good that you do.
Mm-hmm,
So the ego can use your good as
Mhm.
well.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not that you shouldn't give. Go ahead and give.
Mm-hmm.
But you notice whatever the ego does afterwards.
Here's the ego. There are people that will support us financially if they can give and have a write-up. A right, what after the end of the year?
A deductible.
A deductible.
A deduction.
A deduction. And they say,
Or some people would give if they could get notification that everybody would know that they gave.
And this is what has happened to a certain movie star that has put a blessing on a certain pastor that gave millions and then laid hands on the pastor as though he was going
I would
out.
fall out too if somebody
Yeah,
gave me
somebody gave me $1
$1
million. I guess I'd act like I was in the spirit too. But you see, the channels are no different than me walking up to this man or him giving $1 million behind closed doors and nobody. It should have never been publicized. Like here's the ego again.
Exactly.
When somebody win the Powerball, I heard it said that some people would not want it put on television as to who the winners were. I can believe that because they said that if you win it, you must display it or advertise it. But then they say at the end of it, you'll have neighbors all around you coming to your door asking
all
for
kinds
help.
Of people, yeah.
Now you should be able to win that money. But they said this: if we don't put it on the air and advertise it, this is what we heard. May be wrong about it. We are not allowed to not put you over on television.
They have to be.
They have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's foolishness.
Now I want to address what Sonia said.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're talking kind of all around the world.
But that's
today.
okay. Go ahead.
She says, "Thank you. I've always wondered what was the difference between witchcraft and the manifestations that we see in the religious realm. A part of me always felt like they had a similar base.
They did.
And one of the things, Sonia, that we want to emphasize is that there are no two powers.
Mm-hmm.
There are no two powers. The only power there is God.
That's right.
There is only God's power. However, in these localized incarnations, God's essence inside these forms is playing the role of everything that we see, both good and evil.
Yes.
However, from the point of this being an illusion, a dream world that we've all created, that is just a play going on. We call it the God play. God playing every part. And they play that part for other things to happen. Give you an example. So we're not going to say that there's an evil. We don't really believe in witchcraft.
Not to say that doesn't exist, but
but we don't believe in its power. We don't believe that the power,
like we used to.
Right. We don't believe that there is power in witchcraft. But we do know there are people who believe it, and as long as they believe it, they will create something. So let me give you an example of how evil can be used for something good. There was this guy who had a friend coming to town. I just read it this week. He came to town. He wanted to spend time with him, and he wanted to go to all these Broadway shows. Well, some of the Broadway shows were sold out. So he went out to buy some tickets for him. And as they were standing in line, the line was really, really long. And there was this really, really tall guy behind him who was trying to get ahead of them. So he stuck his arm out over them and asked the ticket salesperson for the tickets. And of course, he gave the ticket salesman some money. And then when the ticket salesman gave him the tickets, he realized that the man had not given him the right amount of money. And the man took off like he was going to run. And so the man who was standing there with his friend to purchase tickets because he was wanting to see the show, he said, "You have to come back and pay this man the money that you owe him." When he did that, the man stopped and he came back and paid him. After that, the ticket salesman, even though the show was absolutely sold out, gave them VIP seats.
Wow.
So that's a good example of how that evil thing turned out to be something for good.
Right.
So we can label it as evil, not knowing the big picture.
Now, here's what I found out, and this was a staggering discovery. The power that was used, the energy that was used. I know some of the pastors I went through that was in the gift said, sorry, said, people won't accept the fact that you're saying energy. So you need to say it like the Bible said, spirit. Okay. The same spirit, energy that was working through the magicians in Pharaoh's court was the same spirit, energy that was working through Moses. But what made it different is for the source or what they were using it for. Now, you put a label on it, good becomes evil. Put another label on it, evil becomes good.
Yes.
Now, when I found out that these gates, 5 senses, you see something, hear something, know something, smell something, say something, and perceive intuitively. These are 5 or 6 of them. I've studied them and I've watched them. I've had evangelists come out in the audience and ask me questions about what was going on in my life. And I wanted to meet them behind stage to talk to them about how they do those miracles. So when I got back there, he told me that what he would do after I told him what was going on with me behind stage, I told him all the detail, the doctor's name and everything. And he said, when the time comes and the Lord move on, he will call me out.
Yes.
I went back out there in the audience and sat there and waited, and he came to me. He stood there and told me everything that I told him behind stage.
So you know that there are charlatans out there.
Yes.
Yes. There are
but
people using gimmicks.
I also sat in the audience with those who could really tell me about what was going on my job, and that there was a certain supervisor that was giving me a rough time. And I patterned myself after these guys. I watched them to the degree that I could actually identify with them when they hit that switch on the inside of them. Now, what I'm telling you, honey, is this. You can operate in any of these areas that you want to. Somebody will have to, if you don't know it, or by the grace of God, it's like playing a guitar. If you're gifted, it'll just come out. But there are places where you can deliberately train or be trained how to function in these areas. There are schools of the prophets you can go to. They're all over the country. There are schools of bishops you can go to all over the country, and they can show you. But what makes the difference in the power that comes through you is what you're using it for, and the position that you're in when this comes through you.
Motive means everything.
Okay.
Means everything.
I wanted
even seeking out phenomena.
That's what you're reading here.
Even look at the motive behind
That's right. That's right.
I like what Oliver said here. God is, and there is nothing else. That which we seem to experience as something else is only our own miscreation of separation.
Now, when I saw that young man on television that was crippled from an accident in the Olympic trials, I found out that the true way to operate in this area is, first of all, you got to find out about the ego. But you can't not operate in it just because the ego is that. You got to, grace can be really greasy or not greasy. You know, grace is kind of like you cooking. You can cook fish one night, and on top of the stove a long time ago, you have a cup of grease up there where you keep all the grease from the steaks, the chicken, and the bacon and all that. Put it in a jug or a jar, and when you get ready to scramble egg, you use that same grease. Or you gonna have an egg taste like bacon. You have it taste like chicken. You have it taste like duck. You have it taste like hen. All of them ingredients in that, but you still understand that it's still the grease. Now, here's another one. You can take a car and put gasoline in it, and it'll run. You can also put gasoline in a lawnmower, and it'll run. And some lawnmowers, you have to mix it. Now, and the one that you in a chainsaw, you put gas, but you have to mix something with it. These gifts operate through people with or without the mixture.
So we're talking about gifts now, or
we're still talking about the ego.
Okay.
because this is all about you training and learning how the ego use the gifts and these men and these people behind closed doors. Now, please understand me out there. I'm not judging these people or sending them to heaven or hell. Jesus did say something in that last day. They would come up and say, Lord, did I not heal the sick? Lord, did I not cast out devils and raise the dead and all that? And he'll say, depart from me, you works of iniquity. That doesn't, I got another way of saying it now. I'm just telling you where it was originally. But what he say depart, meaning there's a part of you that can find out how these gifts things work, even in politics. And you can depart by getting caught up in the ziz of the wheel. Now, let me say this to you. Our former president had advisors around him. I saw them when they went around him at the table, and they wanted all over the country to speak into his life. They wanted to do all kinds of things. We call it kissing up. They wanted to get in there with him just for the notoriety of being around our president. And one particular female wanted to be his main advisor, and they are having problems with fulfilling a prophecy that they said. Now listen. I want you to hear something. Hey, hold on. Okay. I want you to listen to this because we're talking about the ego and these gates. I would have, if I could have said anything to our leader, is what we're talking about now. Whether it would do any good or not, that's just the way it is. They were supposed to come around him and unveil the truth to him. They were not supposed to make a deal with him to get what they wanted in their church or in the evangelicals. They were supposed to be around him to be God's insight in the pure judgment and pure advice from a pure prophetic or a pure evangelical point of view from their true self. But they didn't do it because they was caught up in the Luciferian principle. Now, I'm not judging them, sending them to hell or heaven. I'm just telling you the way this thing works in the ego. Now, they don't want to say over the air, I was wrong, I missed it. That's because the ego does not like diminishing. I'm giving you the truth now. I'm giving you straightforward. If they really wanted to function from the wisdom of God and their true self, they would come over the air, every last one of them say, instead of saying, God ain't finished yet, God got this going, and God's going to do this, come over and say, I missed it. And admit to the ego and diminish that thing and kill it right there. Kill it. I had a preacher come in my office one time. He said he wanted to take me under his arms and his wing and make me his son. And I knew that from his sense of the Luciferian principle in his voice, I could hear him say, I want to use this man to do something with in my own image, in my own self. And I told the preacher, I said, listen, I said, don't play no games with me. Don't pull no cover over my head, making me think that you mean everything you say. I said, everything you say to me, I'll kill it and raise it up again. I mean, he said something to me in office. We got into a heated discussion there. He said something about, yeah, but I'll resurrect it too. I said, no, what you resurrect, I said, I'll kill it, bury it, and raise it again if I want to. Well, we never did end up being friends. No, we broke the relationship.
It was two egos fighting.
It was what we called in the natural a peeing contest, and it was both egos clashing with each other.
Well, that's the only thing that argues. That's two egos.
That's right.
There are no arguments if you're not lost in the ego.
That's the thing that the church do not understand about these politics. They don't want to leave it alone and just allow the truth of it to be unveiled. Now, this thing is really hot on the stove, and it's a hot pancake. And I want you guys to understand that we're talking about the ego and what has to be discovered. I used to think that if I could get the power of God to come through me, like I really wanted to, I could go in the hospital and empty all the burn unit, and the whole thing, I could do it. I could just clean out the hospital. Then I looked it up and investigated into it. And one of the powers that operate in Pharaoh's court was called magi. It's the magical side of these manifestations. And then there's another one that operated through there called a power spirit. And then there's another one operated in there through the ego, vanity, and riches and wealth. And ain't nothing wrong with being wealthy now. Please understand this how you use it. And I looked at this thing and I said, I don't want that. I don't want that. But there was still, the powers were still there. They ain't going nowhere. I just found out how to function not from the false self. Ego will lead you down a dead end road. And when it uses you up, and when it gets through with you, it'll drop you. Okay? Now I know you got to get with me on this, but I'm telling you that I wanted to talk to them about this because I want you guys to understand that there are a lot of people in the course and in the enlightenment and waking up that say that these things don't necessarily have to be. They are there, but you are not functioning in them from the standpoint of the church. You are still working miracles and you're still doing healings, but you're doing it from a different point of view in a different way. So I've studied, my wife and I have studied all of those that were saved, they were baptized in the Spirit, anointed of God, greatly used of God. Thousands of people in Africa coming to God on the stage. I've studied where they would be standing in a field with thousands of people, and these boys who had the healing power of God could hear bones and things popping in place out over the field. Back in the old Sawdust Trail, the tent revivals, I studied them and was around them, and know this power that we're talking about can work through even the coarse people if they wanted it to. Nobody forces you to work in these things, but if there is a compassion, Jesus moved with compassion and an empathic ability. To move with compassion is to identify with those people who are in these bad positions, like I did with that guy on the television. I identify with him, but to identify with them, you have to become them or be aware that you're one with them. That's the best way to do it. So when you get through, you leave out of their presence expecting no pat on the back. That's the difference between true meditation in your private time and then going out before the audience and praying with a gift that you think will get their attention. You don't have to do it like that. It's a private way you can do it without the ego, and it will fix you in a position where you won't have to deal with the storms of the Luciferian principle. Okay, we come to the end of this road.
Yeah, we are.
We are. Okay. You want to talk to him a little bit about the end of the road?
No more than that. We will be back again on Tuesday
That's the
night
end
at
of the road
7.
talk. There you go.
Hope you guys got something out of this
I hope
today.
you did too. I really do. I really do. Hope you got something from this.
And we want to thank Jill for putting up the fact that you can give. I want to make sure that I put that up there as well, and that you guys can see that. Let's see. Let me go back to some of the comments here. Sonia says, so is repentance in Christianity really a way of recognizing that we were operating in the false self? She's asking a question.
Say, go ahead.
So is repentance in Christianity really a way of recognizing that we were operating in the false self?
Yes. The true repentance is finding out. True repentance is saying, I found out who I am, and I no longer want to be the false identity. Mm-hmm. That's what I call getting saved.
Yes.
It's different than what we preach in the church. But it is, in other words, you find out that you are no longer a conditioned self.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
That's good.
So we will see you guys on Tuesday.
Yeah, please come back and be with us on Tuesday at 7. And as far as the switch and the contracts that I'm talking about mostly is the contract that we fill out in the spirit realm before we came to this dimension. But I would be glad to talk to some of you privately about some of these things. And I think I've revealed most of the hooks, turns, and roadmaps about how to function in these manifestations. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember, what is it? Asking the question behind why you want to know these things, and that would tell me on your statement as to whether I should venture into it deeper with you, because some people want to operate in these manifestations just for proving something to themselves or to others.
And that's why a lot of times I don't even talk about them.
Yeah.
Because it does cause people to do that.
But I still function in them, but in a different way. And it is absolutely wonderful to see people helped, regardless of which way it's done. It's still help. Thank you so much for helping us out financially, about contributing and investigating into our finances to help us a little bit. We thank you all for tuning into us each time. We bless you.
And we want to remind you to please continue to give your tithes and offerings to Cornerstone. And we appreciate your personal gifts to us, but we still need that because Cornerstone is a virtual church and has still expenses to continue. If you would do that, make sure that you give. And Jill again has posted that, and you'll have it also posted on the Facebook page and the YouTube page. You can go to our website, which is the Cornerstone Life Center, and that'll be it. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Well, look, all you guys out there, Brother Eric and all of you, I carry you in my heart from the top of your head to the bottom of your soul. I carry you in my spirit and heart. We are the same juice in different cups.
Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye. See you next time.